Hey there. Welcome to Bookfest Fall 2025. I'm Bill Bernhardt, and I think there's a bio of me somewhere on this website connected with Bookfest. So suffice to say, I've written a bunch of books, and I'm also the host of an annual writers conference called WriterCon in Oklahoma City every Labor Day weekend, which I suspect is why they asked me to address the topic of 7 secret benefits of writing conferences. And good grief, if I'm going to cover 7 secrets, I better get going. So let's plunge right into the 7 secrets, explaining why you need to attend writing conferences. Number one, to improve your writing. Okay, that might not have been that much of a secret. I think everybody, especially before they've had that first published book, feels a little bit insecure about your writing. And to some extent, that's justified because it's like everything else in the world. The more of it you do, the better you get. You've heard the 10,000 hours rule popularized by Malcolm Gladwell. And, it takes 10,000 years to master anything. So never think that that time you're spending writing is a waste. It's not. And go to these conferences and see what you can learn that will improve your writing craft. Maybe viewpoint is something that comes up a lot. I published my first book in 91. I don't think I even knew what viewpoint was. I did it to some extent instinctively, but I did it a lot better once I knew, what I was doing. And same thing for creating characters, creating multi-dimensional characters. How do you get beyond yourself and writing about yourself and your own past, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, right? And get into a story that's going to be interesting to other stuff. Plus, there are fundamental issues. Where do you go if you have a question about craft? Well, you go to a style guide. Chicago Manual of Style is the one used by virtually all publishers. I didn't know that when I started. Section on Grammar and Style by Brian Garner. That's your go-to when you're wondering, can I start a sentence with a conjunction or can I end a sentence with a preposition? By the way, the answer to both is yes. Doesn't mean you should, but you can and not be violating any rules. And it was a part of what I think has given self-publishing a not great reputation is not that everybody there is a bad writer. They're not, but sometimes they're not familiar with the craft issues that help you make your book more immersive. So that's the number one reason to go to a writer's conference. And I put that number one for a reason. I see people not only at the conference, but we have an annual cruise. We have the WriterCon retreat, a small group of people focused on their work, exchanging ideas and whatnot. And too often, I see people who've gotten, you know, very fond of their work, and sometimes they end up self-publishing it and wondering, why didn't I make $1 million? Well, it's because the book wasn't ready for prime time. At least a lot of times it is. So go to the conference, find out what you need to know. Okay, secret number two, you're going to improve your writing, yes, but you're also going to improve your knowledge of the industry. And that's another thing that cannot be understated. The publishing world is a lot more complicated than it was when I started in the 1980s, actually. And most of that is for the good. There are more opportunities now for authors to take advantage of, except you can't take advantage of them unless you know what they are, right? Whether you're going to go traditional publishing. Why do we call that traditional? Self-publishing is older, but whatever, you know what I mean. Having an intermediary who acts as your conduit to the bookstores. That's traditional publishing, self-publishing, Amazon, hybrid publishing. Some people just publish from the website. Some people use Wattpad. Some people use patronage or crowdsourcing sources, but you can't use any of that unless you know what it is. And some of these decisions are things that you should make maybe even before you start writing, certainly before you start trying to sell the book or get somebody to represent it. You need to have your plan. If you're writing a book for market X, that should influence the way you write. So get all the information you can about the industry. I know a lot of you are sitting there saying, oh, I don't care about the business. I just want to write. Unfortunately, that's not an option in today's world. Being a writer is like having your own small business, and no small business succeeds unless you know what you're doing. Okay. Secret number three, find your team. Now, What makes up your team is going to vary somewhat depending upon what path you're choosing. If you're going to traditional publishing, you're going to probably want an agent, at least if you're going for the largest publishers. You may have an editor who edits in the house. Whether you do or you don't, you need an editor. And then, of course, you need the publisher. Let me just stop and say a word about editors. Everyone needs an editor. Even guys like me who have published 66 books, I'm still not putting anything out there unless somebody else, somebody else's actually, have looked at it and given me their thoughts. Authors just tend to get too close to it. You need somebody else to bounce ideas off of. And if you're going for the big five, that's what we call the largest so-called New York publishers. I say New York because, they have offices in New York, but they're all part of big multinational corporations, except Simon & Schuster, which is owned by a private equity fund. I mean, is that a New York company? Whatever. If you're going that route, then you need to have your team. You're going to need an agent who can sell your book to that market. And then you're going to have an editor and a publisher who can distribute the book effectively so bookstores are interested in picking it up. I wish I could tell you that if you've got a major big five publisher, all your editing concerns are over, but that's not necessarily true. Some editors do a better job of editing than others. Editor, associate editor, executive editor, whatever, those are titles. Those guys are in meetings all day long. They do not have time to edit your manuscript. If they're going to do that, they're probably going to take it home over the weekend. And who wants to work then? That's not always the case. I've got a book coming out in April, and I thought my editor, Jeremy, did a terrific job editing that. Really, really helped bring the thing to life. But not everybody gets that. So that's what you're looking for. Your team, your agent, your editor, your publisher, and you're about 1,000 times more likely to get an agent if you're at a conference where you can actually meet them, sit across the table or sit at lunch or in the bar or whatever and talk to them, make an impression than you will be if you're just sending query emails and whatnot. I'll just brag slightly about my own conference, WriterCon, because I'm in charge of choosing the agents, and I don't choose anybody I wouldn't be happy to have be my agent. In fact, some of my agents, past and present, have been there. So, they're quality people, but I'm not going to name any names, but I've been to other places where they had agents who didn't even have a website and couldn't tell me what they've sold. There are agents who, they kind of go to conference to conference, but I don't think they're selling many books. You don't want to waste your time with that. You want to go for the first top flight people who can have track records for selling authors' books. Number 4, you need to understand the market, the marketplace, the marketing. Who are you writing for? If there's, again, a uniform problem I see when I go to the retreat, for instance, where I actually have a chance to read people's manuscripts and connect with them and give direct feedback, and other people do too. This is the common denominator for a lot of people's first book, whether it's a memoir or it's fiction. The main character is them, thinly disguised, maybe them with superpowers, but it's them, and it's located in their hometown, and the other job and family circumstances are similar to their own. And I get that. That's the easiest thing to write because that's what you know. But it's possibly not the best thing for your book. Don't just sit down and write if you're aspiring to be a professional writer. Now, if this is just kind of writing as therapy for you, fine. Doesn't matter. Do what gets all that out. But if you're writing and hoping to sell some copies of this book, you need to think about, what area am I writing in? What do other books in this area do? What will my readers anticipate? How can I draw people in? Do I need some kind of hook? Do I need some kind of big premise? Do I need characters who sparkle? Well, of course you do. Point is, don't just think about yourself and please yourself. Think about the audience, because if you put things in to attract an audience, you're much more likely to get one. As a writing coach or instructor, nothing is more frustrating than to have somebody come to a program and perpetually reject information saying, no, I'm trying to write something more serious and more literary. I don't want to do that. And then the book comes out and it sells 2 copies, one to each parent. And they start blaming it's the market, it's the publisher, it's somebody else's fault. Well, why did you think people would be interested in it if you weren't thinking about the audience in the first place? Going to the writers' conference, talking to other people who are actually functioning in these genres or areas will only make you better able to write it. Number 5, in addition to understanding the market, you need to understand the marketing. Now, this is similar to what I was saying before about publishing and agents and whatnot. I know many of you are sitting there saying, oh, I don't want anything to do with marketing. That's why I want traditional publishing, because I just want to sit at home and with my writing blanket and my writing kitty. Mine's right over there trying to get in while I record this. But, you know, that doesn't work anymore. Traditional publishing, self-publishing, something in between, you have to be involved in the marketing. That may well be written into your contract, whether it is or it isn't. They will expect you to be involved with your marketing. And that means you got to know what works and what doesn't. Social media, ads on Facebook or other places, what works and what doesn't. This is not as horrific as some people make it sound. You know, back in the day, as I said, my first book was published in 91. And all I can say is if you think going on a book tour sounds glamorous, you've never been on one, because it's not. It's getting up early and flying somewhere and getting on the morning show and then doing the NPR show and maybe hitting a few bookstores and then going to a signing where maybe 2 people show up and you mostly drum your fingers and give people directions to the bathroom. I'm not being bitter. I'm just being realistic. Compared to that, social media is a breeze and it costs nothing, and it does in fact sell books if you know how to do it, know what you can do and what you can't. Remember that you're building an audience. You're trying to get people interested in you and your work. And you don't do that by constantly posting commercials. And there are a lot of other things you can learn, things you can do early, signature block in your email. Got to have a website before your book comes out. Maybe you got to start collecting email addresses so you can start a Substack newsletter. You can't do everything. You've got to choose what you can do and what's going to work for you. And you'll get those ideas and figure out how to make them effective by learning from people who have done it successfully at a writing conference. Number 6, 6 and 7 are kind of related, but 7 secrets sounds so much better than 6. 6 is meet people. Find your support group. This is something I always emphasize at WriterCon, like on the first day. Hey, you found your tribe, People's stories are different, but it's possible you may not have had that much support in your writing career. Maybe people didn't, have the same ideas you did. You're just dreaming, Bill. That's what I kept hearing all the time. But you go to this conference and you'll be surrounded by people who feel the same way you do about books and writing and literature, who understand why this is important to you, why it matters, why books matter. And there's nothing better than that. My daughter Katie hosts a group every year where she puts together critique groups for people who want to have a group, either physically present or online through Zoom or whatever, who can exchange ideas about manuscripts. That is invaluable. I don't know how many she set up, but it's a bunch. Or you may want to get beta readers. I remember Phil Margolin came out to the conference one year, terrific writer. And he said he has 10 beta readers that get everything he writes before it goes anywhere near New York. Why 10? Because he figures if one person doesn't like it, well, that's an outlier. But if 6 people have the same problem, he needs to do something about it. Of course, I'm so insecure, I would start revising after the one person, but whatever, you decide. The point is, everybody needs feedback. Editing, critique group, beta readers, whatever. We all get too close to our work. So we need feedback from somebody else, which leads us to number 7, which, as far as I'm concerned, could have been number 1 because it's a big part of a good writers conference. Have fun, meet people, chat. I know most of you are not Not every writer is an introvert, only 98.9% or so. But at the conference, you will find it easier to mingle because people feel the same way you do about things. You are not alone. And we always program things like the open mic, karaoke on Saturday night, talent not required, as I prove year after year. We haven't even have WriterCon Jeopardy on Sunday. It's just a way of getting people together so they can meet and exchange ideas and form bonds that I hope will last, that will encourage you to keep writing even when it doesn't happen overnight, because it probably won't, and encourage you to revise and make it better and help you find your path to publishing success. All right. Those are my 7 reasons. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a part of BookFest Fall 2025.